wasn't the paralysis that terrified me the most. It was the feeling that something was standing in the corner of my room, watching me. I woke up, but I couldn't move. My eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, but my body felt like it was glued to the mattress. My arms, my legs, even my fingers, they wouldn't respond. This wasn't my first time dealing with sleep paralysis. I knew what it was. Your brain wakes up, but your body stays frozen, like someone hit pause on the wrong half of you. Usually it lasts a minute or two, and then you snap out of it. Unpleasant, sure, but manageable. But this time was different. The room felt off. The faint orange light from the street lamp outside filtered through the blinds, casting lines across the wall. The clock on my nightstand ticked loudly, far louder than it should have been. But it wasn't the light or the ticking that made my chest tighten. It was the air. It felt heavy, like I was trying to breathe underwater. And underneath that crushing weight was something else, something I couldn't fully explain. It felt like I wasn't alone. You know that sensation when someone's staring at you, when you can feel their eyes on you, even if you can't see them. That's what it was. A sharp, prickling awareness, like icy fingers running down my spine. My eyes darted to the corner of the room. The shadows, they were thicker, deeper, like they were swallowing up the faint glow of the streetlight. At first I thought it was my imagination. Shadows play tricks when you're half awake, right? But as I squinted into the darkness, I realized something. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a shape. Tall, still, almost blending into the blackness, but unmistakably there. I stared at it, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, to get up, turn on the light, do something. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. And then I heard it. A faint, ragged sound. Breathing. It was slow and shallow, like someone trying to stay quiet, like someone or something was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice it. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat felt locked up. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. I tried to remind myself of what I'd read about sleep paralysis. It's just your brain playing tricks on you. It's not real. It can't hurt you. But it felt real. Too real. The shadow didn't move closer. It didn't move away. It just watched me. I lay there, paralyzed, staring into that corner, time stretching endlessly. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. And then, the shape shifted. Just slightly. A faint, deliberate twitch, like it was adjusting itself. My breathing turned shallow, my vision started to blur at the edges. I thought for a second that I might actually pass out. But then, it stopped. In the breathing, the shifting. Everything went still again. I blinked just once, and when my eyes opened, the corner was empty. The shadows were just shadows again. The faint breathing was gone. And I could move. I shot upright so fast that I nearly fell out of bed. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, my skin slick with cold sweat, and my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone as I grabbed it and turned on the flashlight. I pointed the light into the corner. Nothing, just carpet, a dresser, and shadows that looked perfectly normal again. But the air still felt heavy. The silence still felt wrong. I sat there for hours, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, flinching at every small noise in the apartment. I wanted to believe it was just a hallucination, just my mind playing tricks on me during sleep paralysis, but no amount of logic could erase the feeling that stayed with me long after the sun came up. That feeling of being watched. That wasn't just sleep paralysis. It was something else. And it wasn't finished with me. I'm not exactly what you'd call an exciting person. I'm in my early 30s. I live alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment, and I work remotely. My days are spent staring at spreadsheets and answering emails, and my nights, well, lately, my nights have been spent dreading sleep. But I'm finishing up now, and I'm leaving tonight. This apartment wasn't supposed to feel like this. When I first moved in, I liked how quiet it was. It's tucked into an older building, cracky floors, thin walls, and windows that rattle when the wind picks up. But it felt cozy, at least it did at first. The layout is simple: a small living room, a cramped kitchen, and a bedroom at the end of a narrow hallway. It's nothing special, but it's mine. The bedroom, though, I don't know. There's something about it. The walls are this dull, off-white color that always looks slightly dirty, no matter how much I clean them. And the single window overlooks the neighboring building's brick wall, blocking out most of the natural light. But it's the closet that gets to me. It's big for such a small room, with one of those old sliding doors, the kind with mirrored panels. You'd think having a mirrored closet would make the room feel bigger, brighter even. It doesn't. The mirrors are scratched and smudged in a way that feels permanent, like the glass itself is stained. And one of the panels doesn't slide properly. It's jammed in place, leaving just enough space for the door to stay slightly ajar. At night, I try not to look at it, but somehow, I always do. I've been having trouble sleeping for weeks now. At first it was just the usual stuff, overthinking, staring at the ceiling, that kind of thing. But then came the sleep paralysis. If you've never experienced sleep paralysis, consider yourself lucky. It's this horrible in-between state where your mind is awake, but your body is stuck. You're completely frozen. You can see the room around you, hear the faint hum of your fridge or the ticking of your clock, but you can't move, not even a finger. My first few episodes weren't too bad, just a few seconds of paralysis before I'd snap out of it, gasping and shaken, but mostly okay. I'd tell myself it was stress or too much caffeine, and I'd try to move on. But it's been getting worse. The episodes have become more frequent, more intense. And then there's the feeling. It's hard to explain, but it's like waking up and knowing, really knowing, that you're not alone. Like there's someone standing just out of sight, watching you. The first time I saw it, I was paralyzed in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body locked in place. I couldn't move my head, but my eyes could shift slightly, and they did. Toward the closet. The door was slightly open, like always. But this time, something felt different. There was a shadow there, deeper than it should have been. At first, I thought it was my tired mind playing tricks on me. Sleep paralysis can come with hallucinations after all. But as I stared, barely breathing, the shadow seemed to shift. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. There was something there, a shape, tall, still, watching. He pointed in a circle towards the portrait, a shape with a voice. I couldn't see its face, couldn't make out any real details, but I could feel its eyes locked onto me. When I stopped at the bus stop, I could hear it saying in its mind. When I finally snapped out of it, my body jerked upright so violently I nearly fell out of bed. My chest was heaving, and my throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming silently for hours. But the room was empty. The closet door was still slightly ajar, the mirror reflecting my pale, sweaty face back at me. My fight to stay alive and the vampire inside me had finally gone too far, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I tried to remove the door. I sat there for a long time, staring into that crack of darkness, waiting for something, anything, to move. But nothing did. Morning eventually came, and with it the daylight brought the usual comforts. The closet looked normal again, the shadows gone, the air lighter. But the feeling stayed with me. You know how sometimes you see something out of the corner of your eye, and when you turn to look, it's gone. That's how it felt, like whatever was in the closet wasn't gone. It was just waiting. I told myself it was just a hallucination, just my brain playing tricks on me during sleep paralysis. But even as I went about my day, answering emails, drinking coffee, pretending everything was fine, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It terrified me being safe in my own place. Because deep down, I knew the truth. That shadow in the closet, it wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real, and it was still there. Inciting incident. 2 men talking in darkness. One of them talking. Sleep paralysis is supposed to be brief. A few seconds, maybe a minute, before your body catches up to your mind and you snap back into control. But this time, it felt like it went on forever. It started the same way it always does. I woke up in the dead of night, eyes snapping open to the faint glow of the street lamp seeping through my window blinds. I could hear the ticking of the clock on my nightstand, steady and loud, like it was keeping time with my racing heartbeat. But I couldn't move. My body was locked, heavy, like I'd been buried under concrete. My chest felt tight, and every breath was shallow, strained, like I had to fight for every sliver of air. I tried to stay calm, to remind myself that this was just another episode. It'll pass. Just wait it out. The air around me was heavy, colder than it should have been. And then, impossibly close to my ear, I heard it. Cha-chink, 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 cha-chink. Your bill's been paid. I lied. A faint, ragged breath. Slow, wet, as if someone was inches from my face, trying not to make a sound. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to run, but I couldn't move. I could barely even blink. My eyes flicked to the side, as far as they could go without moving my head, and that's when I saw it. In the far corner of the room, just beyond the faint glow of my bedside lamp, something was standing there. A figure, tall and impossibly still. At first, it could have been mistaken for a shadow, a trick of the light. But shadows don't breathe. The faintest outline of shoulders, of a head tilted slightly downward as if studying me. Its body was wrapped in darkness, but the eyes caught the light. 2 glassy, hollow reflections staring at me, unblinking. The longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't just looking at me. It was aware of me. It knew I was awake. It knew I could see it. And then, it shifted. It didn't move closer. It didn't lunge or make a sound. It just shifted. A slight tilt of the head, a faint twitch in its posture, as if it was reacting to me. The way, did you understand me? For God's sake, did I say this? He yelled. It didn't say a word. That was the moment the fear turned into something else. Something deeper, something primal. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Every part of me felt frozen, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. I was locked in place, caught in a silent standoff with it. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I felt something press down on my chest. Not hard, not aggressive, just a steady, oppressive weight. Like invisible hands pinning me down. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned as I fought against the invisible pressure, my chest rising and falling in quick, shallow bursts. My body was trembling, but I couldn't move a single muscle. The figure didn't move. It just watched. And then, suddenly, like a rubber band snapping back into place, my body released. I gasped so hard it felt like my lungs might collapse. I sat upright in bed, clutching my chest, choking on air. My skin was clammy with sweat, and my head was spinning. The room was empty. The figure was gone. The shadows were just shadows again. But the air still felt wrong, heavy, stale, suffocating. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. I checked every corner, under the bed, and finally, the closet. The door was slightly ajar, just like always, the mirrored panel reflecting my pale, panic face back at me. My reporter's eye roved the room, looking for signs of someone else in the same mirrored mode. Nothing was there. But then my light caught something on the wall, just near the edge of the closet door frame. Scratches. Faint, uneven scratches etched into the wall, 4 long lines, trailing downward, almost like claw marks. My stomach twisted, and a cold wave of nausea washed over me. "Not real," I whispered to myself, clutching my phone tighter. "It's not real. Z. But it was real. Those scratches weren't there before. I was sure of it. Just the worse. Staccato, take me to the cellar. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat on the edge of my bed, the flashlight still clutched in my hand, staring at the closet door and the corner where I'd seen. When the first light of dawn started to filter in through the window, I felt a sliver of relief. But the scratches were still there. The air was still cold, and I still felt watched. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe even a hallucination brought on by too many sleepless nights. But the scratches were real. The feeling was real. Lev, I can't say touch it. I hate it. Something was in that room with me, and I had a horrible, sinking feeling that it wasn't finished yet. Escalation. Fear has a way of turning into routine. It starts as a sharp jolt, an immediate, primal reaction to danger, but over time it becomes something duller, heavier, a weight you carry with you everywhere. And yet, a weight of life which clouds your mind. I started noticing the pattern a few nights after the scratching appeared on the wall. Every single time I woke up paralyzed, the clock on my nightstand read the same thing, 3:15 a.m. About 3:15 a.m., my phone started ringing. At Elspeth's, someone wanted to speak to me. I didn't see who was there. At first, I brushed it off. Coincidences happen, right? But it wasn't just once or twice. It was every time. Like clockwork, I'd wake up frozen, my chest tight, and my eyes locked on the closet door. The cat's cradle had been cut apart. My pile there proved false, and the corners had been torn out. And each time, the air felt thicker. It got to the point where I started dreading bedtime altogether. I'd stay up as late as I could, scrolling through my phone, watching pointless videos, anything to avoid closing my eyes. But exhaustion always won, and no matter when I fell asleep, 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m., I'd still wake up at 3:15 a.m. Each time I fell asleep, I'd start with a feeling of my wits under control and let it spiral out into the confusion of mine. And every time, it felt like something was waiting for me. During the day, I tried to distract myself, work, chores, anything to keep me out of that bedroom. But even in daylight, the feeling never really went away. I fell asleep in Kate Malloy's ancient dining room. One afternoon, I decided to confront it. Logically, I inspected every inch of the bedroom. I pulled the blankets off the bed, checked under the mattress, tapped on the walls. I even climbed into the closet, shining my phone flashlight into the corners. That's when I noticed it. On the inside of the closet door frame, right where the door slid shut, were more scratches. Long, uneven marks, like someone had been dragging their fingernails across the wood. Some were deeper than others, some fresh. Others faded, like they'd been there for years. But the thing that really unsettled me was their placement. The scratches weren't random. They were focused, all clustered around the edge where the door meets the frame, as if something had been trying to get out. My stomach turned, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a pile of clothes. That night, I decided to do something I'd been avoiding. I set up my phone on a chair across from the closet, angled so it had a clear view of the door and part of my bed. I opened the camera app, hit record, and placed it carefully before climbing into bed. After a few minutes of study, I finally disengaged my eyeball and sat it upright. I drew the cloth curtains across and put my head under the lid. I also did everything I could think of to secure the closet. I slid the door shut until I heard the faint click of the latch. I wedged a chair under the handle, bracing it against the floor. I left my bedside lamp on, bright enough to see, but dim enough to keep the shadows alive. "Splendid," Kira replied, grabbing my carrier bag from the blanket. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours before exhaustion finally dragged me under. But like always, it didn't matter what time I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was 3:15 a.m. I couldn't move. My breath was shallow, my eyes locked on the closet door. The chair was still in place, unmoved. But something felt wrong. My hand flew to my neck, but something felt wrong. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that, but when I finally broke free, the first thing I did was grab my phone and stop the recording. The footage was over 6 hours long. I scrubbed through it, scanning the timeline for anything unusual. And then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the screen flickered. The rooms waiting in darkness and stillness seemed empty. Not much, just a faint glitch like static on an old TV. But when I slowed it down, frame by frame, my stomach dropped. Bentley picked the file back up. For less than a second, there it was, a figure, not fully formed, more like a silhouette, a tall, crooked shape standing just beside the closet door. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel its eyes staring through the screen. And then the rest of the footage was normal. Nothing moved, nothing changed. But those few frames, those awful few frames, were burned into my brain. After that night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't lie to myself, couldn't dismiss it as stress or hallucinations. There was something in that room. The psychiatrist spoke with concern. "They're in that closet." I stopped sleeping in the bedroom entirely. I dragged my blankets and pillows to the living room couch and stayed there, the bedroom door shut tight behind me. But it didn't help. I could still feel it. Even from the couch, I'd stare down the dark hallway toward my bedroom door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. Most nights it did, my limbs frozen in scary poses. The nights stretched on endlessly. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My work started piling up, unanswered emails cluttering my inbox. I stopped replying to friends, stopped leaving the apartment. Every noise felt sinister, every shadow felt alive. I even considered leaving, just packing a bag and walking out. But every time I stood by the front door, something held me back. It was like whatever was in that room didn't want me to leave. You don't think the thing that went in? I spent one night, if you can even call it that, just sitting in the living room, with every light in the apartment on, clutching my phone and staring at the hallway. Oh. At some point I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up to my phone buzzing in my hand. It was a notification from the camera app. Motion detected. My blood turned to ice. The timestamp read 3:15 a.m. I couldn't bring myself to watch the clip. I couldn't. Instead, I turned off my phone, curled up in the corner of the couch, and stayed there until the sun came up. But in the daylight, with trembling hands, I finally played the footage. The clip was short, just a few seconds. The camera had picked up faint movement near the closet door. Paul stood up slowly. But then, right at the edge of the frame, I saw it. A hand. Pale, thin fingers curling slowly around the edge of the closet door, from the inside. And then, the clip cut out. I dropped my phone, my hands trembling so hard I couldn't pick it back up. I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was in that closet, it was aware of me, and it wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. Midpoint realization. There comes a point where fear stops being something you feel and starts being something you live in. A constant presence, wrapping itself around every thought, every breath, every moment of stillness. After watching the footage, the pale hand curling around the closet door, I knew I couldn't keep running from this. I couldn't keep pretending it would stop on its own. I had to face it. So I made a plan. I wasn't going to sleep that night. I wasn't going to let my guard down. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight and sat upright in bed, staring at the closet door. The chair was still wedged under the handle, and I had a heavy metal flashlight in my hand. Not that it would do anything if it came out. The clock ticked away, second by second, dragging me closer to 3:15 a.m. At 3:14 a.m., the air changed. It's hard to describe how you feel here, but I swear it became heavier, thicker. The faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen seemed distant, and the ticking clock felt like it was hammering inside my skull. She shrugged and turned to look outside, and then the closet door creaked. Not much, just a faint sound, the soft scrape of wood against wood, as if something inside had shifted its weight. The chair didn't move, the door stayed closed, but something was awake in there. Something was awake in there. And then the clock struck 3:15 a.m. I froze. My breathing stopped, and every hair on my body stood on end. The air felt electric, charged with something wrong. The light from my phone flickered slightly, and in that trembling beam, I saw it. The closet door shifted, just barely, maybe half an inch, but it moved. And then a shape, tall, crooked, wrapped in shadows, slid into the dim light of my bedside lamp. I couldn't see its face at first, only the suggestion of shoulders hunched unnaturally forward and arms hanging too low, knuckles nearly grazing the floor. It didn't walk, it glided. And then, as it stepped closer, the light caught its face. Pale, so pale it was almost translucent, like stretched wax over a skull. Its eyes, two hollow, glassy voids, locked onto mine. They didn't blink. They didn't move. Its mouth hung slightly open, frozen in something between a smile and a scream, lips cracked and dry. He looked back again. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything. I no longer believed in the idea of psychic Claire, but I knew it was the truth, and that I was the subject of Bill's spell. I couldn't move. I felt sweat pouring down my face, my heart racing. I knew he was watching me. The flashlight in my hand trembled, the beam shaking wildly across the room, landing briefly on its face before darting away. Then I saw what I was looking for. Its head tilted slightly to one side, like a dog hearing a strange sound. And then it smiled. Not a human smile, not even close. Its mouth stretched wide, too wide, pulling the skin tight across its hollow cheeks. The figure took another slow step forward, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. It knew I couldn't move. It knew I was trapped there, frozen in fear, unable to even close my eyes. And then it did something I still can't fully process. It breathed. A slow, raspy inhale that rattled in its throat, like it was savoring the moment, like it was smelling me. The air turned cold, my chest felt tight, and I swear I could feel its breath, wet and freezing, on my face. My phone slipped from my trembling hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The flashlight went out. Darkness swallowed the room. For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, paralyzed in the pitch black, my ears straining for any sound. But there was nothing. No breathing, no movement, just silence. My lips parted, as though I was crying out. Odd how much crying the nostrils are. I didn't want to lose him. I shut my eyes tight. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. And I stayed like that, frozen, silent, waiting. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the window blinds, I cracked my eyes open. The room was empty. The chair was still wedged against the closet door. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. Nothing was normal anymore. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip it. The flashlight app was still open, but the battery was almost dead. I forced myself out of bed and crossed the room to the closet. My feet felt like they were made of stone, every step heavier than the last. The scratches were still there on the wood, more of them now, fresh ones, overlapping the old ones. I leaned in close, inspecting them, and that's when I saw it. A book. Wedged into one of the deepest scratch marks was something small, almost unnoticeable. A fragment. It was pale, jagged, and sharp. A tooth. I stumbled back, nearly falling over. My vision blurred as panic surged through my chest. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't spend another night in this room. But even as I backed out into the hallway, my eyes darted back to the closet door, still slightly ajar, the mirrored panel reflecting the pale morning light. It wasn't just the reflection that caught my eye, it was the shape. For just a moment I thought I saw it again, a faint shadow in the mirror standing just behind the door, but when I blinked, it was gone. In the daylight I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that it was exhaustion, stress, hallucinations, brought on by too many sleepless nights. But the scratches were real, the tooth was real, and the feeling in the pit of my stomach, the gnawing certainty that I wasn't alone in that room, that was real too. Her tone was clinical. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know why it was fixated on me. But I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't finished with me yet. Descent into obsession. Sleep had become a distant memory. At some point, I stopped even trying. Lying in bed felt pointless, like an invitation for it to come closer. Instead, I sat in the living room, hunched over my laptop, drowning in an endless cycle of research. Sleep paralysis. hypnagogic hallucinations, demonic entities, shadow people. The forums were filled with stories, some vague, others horrifyingly specific. People described figures watching them from corners, pressing on their chests, whispering in voices they couldn't understand. But nothing I read matched exactly what I was experiencing. Most people talked about one-time encounters, fleeting visions, nightmares they could shake off once they were awake. But this was... The scratches, the tooth, the shape in the shadows. It felt aware. My days blurred together, an exhausting haze of coffee, flickering screens, and bloodshot eyes. My phone sat face down on the table, its camera roll still holding that awful image of the pale hand curling around the closet door. That's where I was, at my kitchen table, staring blankly at my laptop screen, when Sam texted me again. "You've gone radio silent, man. Are you okay? Should I come over?" I hesitated. I wanted to say no. I wanted to keep everyone away from whatever this was. But a deeper part of me, some lonely, terrified fragment, wanted someone else here. Someone who could tell me I wasn't losing my mind. "Yeah, come over, please." When Sam arrived, his face immediately dropped. "Jesus, dude, you look awful." I didn't argue. I knew I looked like a wreck. Dark circles under my eyes, hollow cheeks, a nervous twitch in my hands every time I glanced at the hallway leading to my bedroom. Sam stepped inside, taking in the cluttered apartment, the discarded coffee mugs, the laptop surrounded by crumpled notes, the faint smell of stale air. "You've been holed up in here this whole time, haven't you?" I nodded. He frowned, looking toward the slightly open bedroom door. "Is it in there?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Sam sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay. You need sleep. And you need someone here to remind you that whatever's going on in your head, it's not real." She pulled a face at him, grinned warmly at him, and backed back into the house. "It's really hot," she said, as she pulled on her helmet over her coat. I wanted to argue, but the exhaustion kept me quiet. That night, Sam sat up on the couch while I paced the living room. He kept trying to joke, to lighten the mood, but his nervous glances toward the bedroom told me he wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. "Look, man," he said, finally breaking the silence. "I'll stay the night, all right? You sleep in your room, I'll sleep here. Nothing's gonna happen." I didn't respond. I just stared at the bedroom door. Eventually, Sam fell asleep on the couch, snoring softly. I stayed awake, pacing, staring at the clock. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., noon, going south, twice. The siren came. It was midnight precisely. When the clock hit 3 a.m., I felt it again. That thick, suffocating weight in the air. I turned my head toward the hallway, and for a brief second I considered going into the bedroom, facing it, ending this. Safety demanded utterance. But then from the living room couch, Sam screamed. It wasn't a startled yell. It wasn't confusion. It was a raw, animalistic scream of pure terror. It went on for half a minute, and then stopped every time something violent actually happened. James went to pick up his little brother's scream. I stumbled into the living room, heart racing, and found Sam sitting bolt upright on the couch, his face pale and slick with sweat. I crouched beside him. "The door," he stammered, pointing toward the hallway. "It was open. It was wide open, and something was standing there, right in the doorway." The door was open, slowly, toward the bedroom. The door was open, not slightly ajar like usual, wide open, unmoving. The mirrored closet door caught the faint glow of the hallway light, reflecting a distorted version of the room inside. But the space between the door and the shadows inside, it felt like a mouth. Open. waiting. Sam shot up from the couch, grabbing his keys from the coffee table. No, I'm not staying here. I can't. Sam, wait. But he was already at the door, yanking it open and practically sprinting into the hallway outside. I stood there, frozen, staring at the open bedroom door. The shadows seemed darker, thicker, and the air felt like it was breathing. After Sam left, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. I didn't sleep. I didn't move from the couch. I just sat there, knees pulled up to my chest, staring down the hallway toward the open bedroom door. I knew I should close it. I knew I should do something, but I couldn't make myself move. Eventually, the sun rose. Pale light filtered in through the window blinds, chasing away some of the darkness, but not the feeling. I forced myself to my feet and walked Thursday morning, slowly, toward the bedroom. I forced myself to my feet and walked Thursday morning, slowly, toward the bedroom. The door creaked as I pushed it open wider. The closet was closed now, perfectly shut, the mirrored panel reflecting my hollow, sleep-deprived face. But the scratches on the door frame were deeper now, fresh, almost like whatever was inside had been clawing to get out. I took a shaky step backward and slammed the bedroom door shut. Sam hasn't called since that night. I don't blame him. The days blur together now. The nights are endless. I don't even bother trying to sleep anymore. Not in that room. Not in the living room. The whole apartment feels infected. Like whatever was in the closet isn't confined to it anymore. I hear faint scratching sometimes, on the bedroom door, on the walls, even from inside the hall closet. I think about leaving, packing a bag, running. But every time I stand at the front door with my keys in my hand, something stops me. Christine watches me. I notice her. It's not a physical force. It's not a voice. It's just a feeling. Like whatever's in that closet, whatever's in this apartment, doesn't want me to leave. And deep down, I know one thing for certain. It's waiting for me. It's always waiting. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. So quiet it creeps into your bones and settles there, a weight you carry, even when everything seems still. Zinky took the fight. That night, the silence felt like a living thing. I'd had enough. Enough sleepless nights. Enough scratching in the walls. Enough watching. If I stayed in this apartment another night without confronting whatever was in that closet, I was going to lose my mind completely. So I prepared. I set up my phone cameras, positioning them around the room. One pointed directly at the closet, another angled to capture the space around the bed. I grabbed my flashlight, its weight cold and heavy in my trembling hand, and wedged a crowbar into my belt. Not that I thought it would do much, but holding it made me feel slightly less helpless. The clock glared at me from the nightstand, 3:10 a.m. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet door. The mirrored panel reflected my pale face, eyes wide and hollow, lips cracked from days of dehydration and stress. My knuckles brown from days. The minutes dragged. Every tick of the clock felt deafening. 3:14 a.m. Rapidly, relentlessly, I fled. The air thickened, pressing down on me like invisible hands on my shoulders. My breaths became shallow, shaky. And then, as the second hand clicked to 3:15 a.m., the room went still. Everything stopped. The ticking clock, the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen, even the distant sounds of traffic outside. It was as if the world itself had been muted. The only sounds The creaking of the fridge in the kitchen, the shutter in the window, the wordless murmur of a tenacious night. "Ruby," she said, taking my hands, "it's okay. It's okay. It's all going to plan." The closet door creaked. Not much, just a faint groan as if someone had leaned against it from the inside. I forced myself to stand. My knees felt like jelly, and my grip on the flashlight tightened until my knuckles turned white. "This ends now," I whispered, though my voice cracked on the last word. I walked toward the closet, each step loud on the wooden floor. The air grew colder the closer I got, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My hand trembled as I reached out and grabbed the edge of the mirrored door. With one sharp pull, I slid it open. The flashlight's beam cut into the darkness, and for a moment, all I saw were the usual things. Clothes hanging limply, boxes shoved into corners, dust particles swirling in the light. Oh, but then I noticed the floor. The wood looked wrong, scratched, uneven, with a faint outline of something. A square almost like a trap door, right at the back. A room shutting down. I crouched down, shining the flashlight on it, my breath caught in my throat. I intentionally, completely switched off the lights. It was a hidden compartment. My fingers scraped against the edges of the wood until I found a spot I could pry it open. With a groaning creak, the panel lifted, revealing a narrow, black void beneath. The smell hit me immediately. Damp, rotten, metallic, like old blood and wet earth. I hesitated, staring into the darkness below. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to stop, to close the panel and leave. But I couldn't. I had friends, small children, who hung on to me desperately. I leaned closer, angling the flashlight into the crawl space. The beam illuminated a cramped, filthy space. The floor was covered in shredded fabric, clumps of hair, and scratch marks. Hundreds of them. They covered the wooden beams, long, deep grooves, some fresh enough to still splinter the edges of the grooves smooth and dirty. And then, in the corner of the space, I saw something else. A pile of blankets. No, not blankets. Something was underneath them. As I angled the flashlight, the beam landed on two eyes. Wide, unblinking, reflecting the light back at me like the glassy eyes of a doll. For a split second, I thought it might just be an animal, some poor creature that had gotten stuck down there. But then, it moved. A slow, deliberate shift as a pale face emerged from the shadows. Its skin was stretched too tight over its skull, translucent and waxy. Its mouth hung slightly open, revealing crooked, yellowed teeth. And its eyes, those hollow, human eyes, never left mine. I shrieked, struggled free. The liquid bottle dropped. Still sweating, I took a deep breath, hung around your neck, continued to shriek, staring at the monster blankly as I reached into whatever frantic clutch of negative emotions it threatened to wash away. It squeaked and squawked, punching the dark sky with forward thrusts. It screamed and moaned. It was smiling. I froze. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't think. The thing, whatever it was, began to crawl forward, its bony fingers dragging along the wooden floor, its shoulders bending unnaturally to squeeze through the narrow opening. The figure shifted remarkably, then stopped. It was coming toward me. In that split second, survival kicked in. I slammed the wooden panels shut and stumbled backward, falling hard onto the closet floor. My flashlight rolled out of my hand and spun wildly, casting chaotic shadows across the walls. My heart pounded, my attention swerving back and forth between the shadows and the screen Jake had painted. I could hear it scratching underneath the panel, slow, deliberate scrapes of nails against wood. I bolted out of the closet, yanking the mirrored door shut behind me and shoving the chair back under the handle. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the door. The scratching stopped. For a moment, the only sound in the room was my ragged breathing and the faint hum of my phone vibrating on the bed. But then, from inside the closet, I heard it, a faint, raspy whisper. "Don't go." I turned and ran. I saw him there waiting for me, his face bewitched. The juice had fled from him. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. I know I left the apartment. I remember stumbling down the stairs barefoot, clutching my phone and keys in one hand, my flashlight in the other. I remember the cold night air hitting my face as I burst out onto the street. But I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, hunched over on a park bench, gasping for air. My phone buzzed again in my hand, a notification. Motion detected. Camera 1. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Whatever was in that closet, whatever was underneath my floorboards, it wasn't human. And it wasn't done with me. I moved out of the apartment the next day. No boxes, no movers. I just grabbed what I could carry and left. Clothes shoved into trash bags, my laptop, my phone, my keys. Everything else, I didn't care. It could all stay there. Oh, yes, she thought. Someone came. He was going to take the kids, and I was furious. The landlord didn't ask many questions when I called him. I think he knew something was wrong with that place. Maybe he'd heard stories before, or maybe he just recognized the crack in my voice when I told him I can't stay there anymore. Found a new place across town, a studio apartment in a crowded building with thin walls and constant noise. Sirens blaring outside, people talking in the hallways, dogs barking upstairs. It was the opposite of the suffocating silence of my old place, and that was exactly what I needed. For the first few nights, I barely slept. I'd lie on the couch with all the lights on, clutching my phone, jumping at every creak and gust of wind. Every shadow felt alive. Every reflection in the windows made my chest tighten. I had stolen something, and it was back. But eventually, the exhaustion won. I started sleeping again, short, restless bursts, but sleep nonetheless. Simon. I tried to tell myself it was over, that whatever was in that closet was tied to that apartment, that space. But fear doesn't just vanish. It clings to you like smoke, seeping into your clothes, your hair, your thoughts. The sleep paralysis came back about a week later. It wasn't as intense as before, not at first. I'd wake up frozen, my chest heavy, my eyes darting around the room. But there was no figure in the corner, no breathing near my ear, just silence. Still, the fear crept in. The shadows in the corners of my studio seemed thicker. The faint cracks in the ceiling seemed to grow longer each night. I moved downstairs, my nerves rattling their way from my head. I walked home, and then there were the dreams. I started dreaming about the old apartment, about the closet, the mirrored door, the scratch marks, the smell of damp wood and stale air, and those eyes, hollow, glassy, and locked onto mine. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, clutching the blanket like it was a shield. I stopped using the closet in my new apartment. I shoved a bookshelf in front of it, stacked boxes against the door. I told myself it was silly, but I couldn't help it. Just looking at a closet door now made my skin crawl. It happened again last night. When I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom mirror fogged up from the hot water, when I noticed something strange in the reflection. Busy part of the city, his closet door, it was open, not wide, just slightly ajar, slightly narrow, a staircase, bones, my toothbrush slipping from my hand and clattering into the sink. I knew that I'd closed it. I'd pushed the bookshelf tight against it, stacked boxes in front. There was no way it could have moved. Slowly, I turned around and stepped into the main room. The bookshelf was still in place. The boxes hadn't been touched, but the door was open just enough to reveal a thin line of darkness. I stood there, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My phone was on the couch, too far away to grab. The air felt colder, heavier. I took a step closer, then another. The floor creaked under my weight, and for a brief second, I thought I heard something. A faint scratch from somewhere deep inside the closet. The voice stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. My body felt frozen, not by sleep paralysis this time, but by sheer, unfiltered terror. I couldn't do it. I couldn't open it. Instead, I turned around, grabbed my keys and phone from the couch, and walked straight out of the apartment. I spent the night in my car, parked in a well-lit gas station parking lot, surrounded by other cars, people walking back and forth. My car was parked at an angle so that it could be used by customers. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring out the windshield, flinching every time someone walked by. When the sun came up, I drove back to the apartment, slowly, hesitantly. The closet door was shut when I got back. The bookshelf and boxes were still in place, undisturbed, but the feeling hadn't gone away. I'm starting to think it doesn't matter where I go, only what you do. Promise me. It doesn't matter how many lights I leave on, how many cameras I set up, or how many doors I wedge shut with furniture. Because whatever it is, it's not tied to a place. It's tied to me. Maybe it's waiting for me to fall asleep again. Maybe it's waiting for me to open another closet door. Or maybe it's just watching, waiting for the right moment. But one thing is certain. It's still with me, I said, and it's not done yet. If you like these stories, please do like, subscribe, comment and share. It really helps, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Have a terrifying story of your own? Send it here. Email utmanagerofnomi@gmail.com.